What is up, Asymmetry? How y'all doing? I could not be more excited to share the extended conversation that Thomas Nevar and I had, which was the base narrative for Chris Yanich's film, where Thomas and I collaborated and he created a painting while I styled a tree. It was on a recent Behind the Branch episode where we kind of dissected the collaboration, this notion of bonsai as art, but the greater conversation that Thomas and I had about our art practices, creativity, and some personal things, including my journey in Japan and post-Japan that I really haven't talked about because nobody's asked me in a context that I felt like discussing it until Thomas brought it up. But it was a really powerful conversation and a wonderful experience that I had being a part of that collaboration and putting together this project with talented individuals who I respect so much. Anyways, if you haven't heard Thomas's first podcast with us, I would recommend that you listen to that. Either listen to that first and then circle back to this, or listen to it after you hear this to have the total context for where his body of work comes from and how he moves forward as an artist. But if you have heard it, and even if you haven't heard it, this is just a really lovely conversation with a fantastic individual that has given me a tremendous amount of inspiration as well as camaraderie and friendship since we've started combining forces and formed the foundation for the film that you saw on Behind the Branch and the film that we will be again releasing to the public this week. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. If you haven't heard it, take a listen. And for now, I've got you captured. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Thomas Nevar, everybody. We were having a conversation last night about how we both plan on doing away with our phones. I was listening to a Michael Pollan interview about the necessity, I was telling you this, the necessity to manage, what did he say? Consciousness hygiene?
Consciousness hygiene.
Consciousness hygiene.
Yeah. I like that. I like the thought of that because we need it.
I think it's very weird to think about.
I think our arteries, our consciousness arteries are clogged at this point with all of the shit.
Yeah.
I mean, even this morning, I'm sitting there waiting on, we're just like hanging out and you're working on your thing. And I'm like, well, I got on my phone and I was immediately just scrolling through.
Yeah, it's devastating.
And then I was like, oh, what's next? And it's like,
what if your immediate reaction to free time was, I'm going to make art?
Yeah.
What if that was your immediate reaction to free time?
Yeah. My wife, so we have horses and it just takes up so much of her time. And she was talking about how, it gets to the point where she's just like, I don't want to do this anymore because it's so much time put into like horses in the barn and everything. And
she doesn't want to do.
She does, but it gets overwhelming.
It feels like every passionate person gets to a point where their passion becomes overwhelming, right?
Right. And she said to me, she was like, well, what if you had to paint every day for 8 hours a day? That's just, you had to paint. You would get to a point where you just couldn't stand to even look at a painting. And my thought was, well, yeah, but imagine what those paintings would be like.
Imagine what I would make.
Yeah.
Right.
Be like, it would be amazing. And I constantly think about that. Oh, I need to paint every day. I need to like at least try to create something every day.
Yeah. How often do you paint?
I'll go on streaks. So I might go out there and paint every day for a week and then take a break. And it really depends on how the creative flow is going. If it's there, then I feel like I've gotta continue.
And when you paint, how long are you painting? If you go on a creative binge, what does that look like in a day? Is that 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours?
Yeah, it's 8-10 hours.
You settle in.
Yeah, I'll settle in. because I have a hard time walking away from a painting,
Unfinished.
unfinished.
So when you start painting, do you paint start to finish? Is that your standard operation?
I try to. Sometimes it doesn't work. I mean, depending on the medium that I'm using. Like we were talking today, like using more of the stains, I can kind of burn them in, and I can get to the place that I want it to be look wise much quicker. Than with oil paint, sometimes you have to wait a week between when you paint to have it set up and dry, and then paint over top of it, depending on your technique. So those drive me crazy because then I'm looking at it for a week knowing I can't touch it.
Do you feel like when you have to wait on those projects that you like lose the momentum, and like something changes?
Yeah, it does. And it's also, there's a famous story of William de Kooning would paint. He would literally have shows and would be painting as the people were in line to come into the gallery, and he'd still be in there painting on, because he was never finished. And it was like, and so that can happen as well, where it's just like, oh, I'm not done. And you think you're done, and then you're like, "Oh, I'm not done." We were kind of talking about that last night a little bit.
You asked me that because I was working on the tree last night, and you were talking about that sort of notorious question, that's asked of artists and creatives, like, "How do you know when you're done?" I've actually never had anybody ask me that.
Really?
No, not once. Not once. In a tree, how do you know when you're done?
How do you know when you're done?
Well, I was thinking about this because you asked me about this. And for me, the whole thing of like making bonsai for me really was about, if I just like think back and I really try to distill it down to like the essence of things, there was a feeling that I got when I realized that you could work with a living thing, that you could sculpt and work with a living thing that created the curiosity. But when I saw Mr. Kimura's work, specifically the first article I ever saw of his work was on a piece of Yamadori juniper that looked like a shrub. And by the time he was done, I could see like a human characteristic, like a personality in it. It looked like a hunched over old man to me, actually. And I was like, whoa. He just imbued this human personality to what at that time I felt like was an inanimate object. Like I didn't think about trees as like living organisms and personalities in this really grand kind of scale and scope of nature's greatest protagonist. Like I didn't have that perspective when I started. Obviously, I think that's the beauty of bonsai, is it exposes people to this much larger realization of these organisms that are the huge, tremendous orator of the landmass to human beings, because our lifespan is so short and theirs is so long. They tell us everything about that landmass. And so, my introduction to it was fairly superficial, but the curiosity was created, I think, by something very deep. And that depth was the sensation of knowing a personality in a organism that I had not identified had a personality until that moment that I saw that. And I was like, wow. And that feeling for me, that like sensation of seeing that personality in the tree became the sensation that I chase.
So do you see it like every tree has its own personality? And I think about cats. A lot of people, if they're not a cat person, your cats are cats. But then when you're actually around cats, every cat has its own personality. They're all completely different. And the same with dogs or anything, horses, that sort of thing. Do you feel like it's the same with trees? That they all have their own personality? They all have...
I think so. Do I feel like every tree has its own personality? I think that I know every tree has its own personality. Because you can look at that and you can say, okay, well, are you giving it the personality through the work that you do to it? And it's like, yeah. However, the work that I do to the trees that I work with is different than the work that we did to the trees when I was in my apprenticeship, or the work that I see a lot of people do with trees, where a lot of times a preconceived idea is being imposed upon the tree, right? Like this
Yes,
is there's already a form thought of.
Exactly.
So from that perspective, if I'm entering working on a tree, trying to make that piece of that tree the best it can be at that moment in time, I'm responding to where it's at in its sort of state of development. I'm not going to work on a tree if it's unhealthy, so it's not a matter of its state of health. It's where it's at in its state of development. But I think the bigger thing is if I can objectively separate myself from an expected outcome, and I can lean on objective criteria of the tree's characteristics, what its baseline features are showing, and if I can arm myself with the knowledge of what the environment the species comes from, what the elements would be acting on, what the tree's trunk, branches, and form are capable of conveying, if I read it all right, and I understand the environments, and I understand the species, and I understand the narrative arc of its age over time, as it will evolve and respond to these elements in nature. Top gets knocked out, it's going to have reiterative trunks. Top gets knocked out, it's going to lose the whole upper part of the tree. Different species are going to respond differently to those traumas. So now all of a sudden, it's like I am working not now with that specific tree's character, but I'm working within the field of that species character. And then you get to that tree, which has more brittle branches or more flexible branches, or more tighter ramification or coarser ramification, or longer needles or larger leaves or shorter needles or smaller leaves, or a fineness to the bark or a coarseness to the bark, which is telling me about the vascular system. It's telling me about the behavior of the tree. All of those things key the aesthetic, but then we went farther and we said scientifically, we're going to test all of this. And universally, the same thing we do to one juniper, we can't do to another juniper. The same thing we do to one Rocky Mountain juniper, we can't do to another Rocky Mountain juniper. And here's where it gets even more wacky. You can take cuttings off of the exact same tree. So technically you've just duplicated, cloned, as they say in like horticulture, which I think that whole notion is kind of weird. You can have two what are thought to be genetically identifiable trees off of the same mother stock that will behave radically different, and through horticultural testing will test radically different, which tells me that when you create an autonomous being, no matter how genetically identifiable they are, there is differentiation just in the act of separation and identity being assigned as independent at that point in time. And I think you have that same thing in humans, no matter what, right? And we accept that. We're like, yeah, of course you would.
Right.
Duh. Right? But to think that that same thing would exist inside of plants and trees is almost like, well, why? There's some sort of like mechanic to this. They're robotic. And it's like, no, that is how life perpetuates. That adaptive characteristic and capacity to always differentiate, however small or large, is constantly happening. The seedling is never going to be genetically identifiable to the parent plant. Some are going to be radical mutations that are so far away from it. But ultimately everything becomes its own independent system that is different than anything else, regardless of how hard you try to homogenize genetics, homogenize personalities, homogenize the science, homogenize the horticulture. And in the case of bonsai, with the aesthetic application, homogenize the aesthetic. You still cannot get trees to behave identically. And so I love that. It's at the root of why I do this.
So it sounds complicated, only in the sense that you really have to, and I'm not sure the exact term. I mean, with humans, it would, you have to be a sociologist to sort of understand,
or a psychologist,
right? To sort of understand all of the different variations in the personalities, right? And that sort of thing. And with the trees, it sounds the exact same, like where they come from, how they behave, what the effects from nature are going to do on the tree, and all of this you keep in mind as you're styling.
I think like one thing that I realized when we went really deep into the science of this whole thing and testing the actual internal content of the trees, I recognized like it was super valuable. I learned a lot. I'll continue to use it as a accoutrement to my practice, but I'm not using it as the crutch that I thought I would start to use it as, because it took away the intuition and the feel and the relationship with the tree. Because I think like it's very dangerous as a psychologist to think that you know everything about somebody because you're a psychologist and you think you understand their psychology, right? So for a tree, even though technically the numbers in the internal content testing that we did suggested that this tree should either be strong or weak, that wasn't always the way that it looked, and it wasn't explainable why. And I think these are some of those mysteries that exist within the natural world, where we're always trying to, as an organism, we are trying to organize and understand on a continuum so that we can, take that next step. We're compelled to advance, to progress. And this seems like that knowledge is the capacity to progress. But somewhere in there, like that progression and that knowledge starts to impede intuition. And I think bonsai, when you see bonsai handled as an art, there's a lot of intuition. And when you see bonsai handled to the highest level, there's a lot of intuition. And the science is important and not disregardable, and it informs and it can explain some things, but it doesn't explain everything. We will never understand everything about plants, just like we will never understand everything about human beings.
Do you think that anyone who practices bonsai should have a baseline knowledge of like the species that they're working on? Like,
I don't think you have a choice. But sometimes you don't have that luxury either, right?
Yeah.
Like working with native plants that have never been pursued as bonsai before. That's been something that I think Mirai has done more than any single facility that I know. And obviously in the early days of like bonsai in Japan, they're using their local flora and they're learning from it, and even the decandling of a black pine, which is common practice in bonsai, is a relatively new technique, as is wiring, compared to the timeline of bonsai as an art form evolving. You're talking about decandling and wiring within the past 100 years. You're talking about bonsai being 700 years old. So those are modern techniques. And so the idea that we're always going to know, or we need that baseline, it's like you take those clues, you start to build that information, you start to build that relationship, you start to build that intuition. Moving that plant changes all of that, and now you've got to do that all over again. So it does become so complex that if you get bogged down in the complexity, it stops being fun. It stops being that thing that like kind of fuels and feeds the relationship with the tree. Like I've found I can get bogged down in the metrics of things. And as much as I really enjoyed that learning capacity, it became more of an impediment than a tool and an empowerment. And so, especially on the creative side of things, the science is such a huge window to be able to lean into creativity, behavior, and sort of key off of some of those things to be able to build an aesthetic and a context for a tree.
Yeah.
But it's only one window. And for me, I think that window, is used sparingly compared to other windows, which my big window that I approach bonsai from is trying to understand the environment and understand the aspects of the environment that apply aesthetic pressure over time, right? Because it's not just the fact that this lives in a windy environment. It's the fact that this tree might live in a windy environment for 100 years is going to look different than 500 years, is going to look different than 1500 years. And I like that narrative arc. And I like carrying a tree through that narrative arc aesthetically. As it ages in a bonsai container, the bonsai container is like dog years, right? So like 1 year in a bonsai container might be equivalent to 25 years in the native environment. Well, that means that I get to carry a tree that when the material only had the material characteristics of a 100-year-old tree, but in a bonsai container is rapidly going to start to have the material characteristics of a 500-year-old tree. I have to take the aesthetic from the 100-year-old tree to the 500-year-old tree if I'm going to advance that narrative arc. And I don't know that anybody really thought long and hard about that, because there's the patina of the design mochikomi in Japan, right? But you still see a lot of big lush canopies on very tortured trunks that are sort of incongruous with what that indicator on the tree has versus what the outcome of the aesthetic is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Japanese model, I mean, we've talked about that many times, and
it's totally beautiful. I respect it.
Absolutely.
And we practice it here and all of that stuff. And also, I just realized, living on the continent where we have the oldest trees on Earth to observe firsthand in person, oh, there's a lot more here. There's a lot more here to be explored, to be represented.
Yeah.
You know, I really like that.
Yeah. Well, it obviously shows in your work, because it's
trying to. Yeah,
so
thank you.
different.
Is it that different?
I think so. I can pick your, and I've said this before to you, that I can pick your work out of a plethora of pics on Instagram or on Pinterest or something. Scroll through. Oh, that's Ryan. That's Ryan. You can see it. It's your work. And
it's interesting.
And I think it's because you've stepped outside of that model, and you've really studied what nature actually, the influence that nature has on the trees. Like, it's not just that, helmet.
Right.
Because when do you actually see that? And I always thought that with bonsai.
Yeah.
Like, when do you actually go out and walk around, in the forest and see a tree that looks like that? You don't. It's
rarely.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are out there. Certain species in certain locations and under certain conditions will give you something like that occasionally, right?
Right.
And when you see that, it's like, oh my God, it looks like a bonsai.
It looks like a bonsai.
It looks like a bonsai.
Yeah.
Like, that's the funniest thing to say, because it's like, well, isn't bonsai supposed to look like the tree? And then we go out there and we're like, that looks like a bonsai. That means that bonsai has a pattern that is different from the natural aesthetic.
But when I walk through your garden, it's not, oh, that looks like a bonsai. It's, oh, that looks like an Engelmann spruce.
Well, if that's what's happening, then we're accomplishing what I personally am trying to accomplish. If I just had to say my artist mission, my artist statement, it is to represent the diverse landscapes of these fantastic organisms across planet Earth in all of their iterations across their lifespan.
Yeah.
Right? And their iterations of the conditions they're experiencing across the narrative arc of their lifespan. That would be what I am trying to do with my work. And it is different, not better, not worse. It's just different than, I think, what other people are trying to do.
Do you find that, and if you were to give advice to someone who's starting out, would you say start with one tree, one species, learn as much as you can about that? I think about art. I think about, and I'm as guilty as anyone else when it comes to this, is that any form of art, I want to learn it. I want to learn, I want to understand how it's done and how it's done at that level, at that highest level. It's like, oh, so sculpting or painting or, design, any of that stuff. It's all like, I want to understand it. But I think that that can be a detriment sometimes, because you're spending so much time learning all of these different techniques, or all of
Jack of all trades, a master of none, right?
Master of none, right? Whereas,
I feel like bonsai, every individual has to, so this is where the beauty of the autonomous individual comes in to also advance the art form. Every individual comes at it from a different point of view, with a different background, a different context for why they're engaging. What you're bringing to bonsai right now, whether it's with your vessels or whether it's with the work that you're doing, is very different than anybody else has brought to bonsai. And bonsai has been practiced for a long time, and all of a sudden, now Thomas Nevar is bringing something to bonsai that is different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's important. Jonathan Cross brought something different. Nick Lins brought something different. Walter Paul, Dan Robinson, Masahiko Kimura, Saburo Kato, like the Suzuki family, the great lineage of Yamadori collectors, the taste of junipers from being formal to being radically contorted in Japan in the early 1900s. Like, these differences are what have made this very, very rich.
Yeah.
And so as a bonsai practitioner, you don't know who the next great innovative figure or the next great revolutionary artist or the next influential, potentially dogmatic confiner of the practice will be. You have no idea, right? Who's going to set the boundaries that maybe inhibit the advancement of the art form for a period of time, or who's going to break the boundaries and expand the limitless nature of the art form for a period of time. And that means that everybody's got to do what their personality is sort of geared to generate the kind of passion and interest that allows them to push to the highest level. That's my feeling. So some people need to have 1,000 trees at one of every species, get to the point where they're overwhelmed and recognizing they're not going to get where they want to get, and then they start to cull, right?
Yeah.
Which maybe is you're not that fanatical yet, but you are at a point where you're recognizing, ooh, okay, I see. If I have a ton of trees, this is tough. And there are other people that in their organized mind and the framework that they bring to it, one species or a few species is all that they can handle to achieve what they want to achieve. And both of those people are going to bring different things. Yeah. And I think that is the colorful nature of bonsai being a reflection of the individual who's practicing and the culture that individual is practicing within and the nature they're trying to represent, however organic or inorganic that nature is.
Do you feel like the U.S. model allows for more autonomy than the Japanese model?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think Americans in general are just trying to stand there and say, this is what I think, and it is important. And it's super
rebellious bunch.
Super obnoxious on a lot of levels, and it's also bred a lot of creativity.
Yeah.
You know, it's bred a lot of innovation. It's bred a lot of different aesthetics, and not all of them are great.
Yeah.
But some of them are really special, you know? And I think that there's certainly value in, I think there's a lot of value. I had this conversation with an architect like a decade ago when we were doing the Artisans Cup, and I was working with an architect, and he said, you know, since like mid-century modern, Art Deco, Bauhaus, there really hasn't been an architectural movement, maybe like the modernist movement, but even that didn't totally get massaged and worked out. He's like, we've been moving so fast that it's about making something new all the time, and we've never sat in an architectural style and massaged it to the highest level and potential since those kind of really iconic and super important architectural movements of like the post-World War II era. And I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, wow, that's crazy. Like that we really haven't beat something to its finest pulp to see what that fineness of that massaging and working can achieve in the most refined level. But the Japanese shokunin mentality and commitment to pursuit of perfection means everything that they touch, they work to that finest texture and that highest level.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes Japanese bonsai so special and so beautiful. And also the innovative voice and the difference of personality is what makes the American approach really interesting and unique and special. And I think the cultural uniqueness of Europe in this confined space of all of these very different cultures makes European bonsai so special. All of those make something different, and all of them are very valuable.
Well, I wonder if we have the attention span anymore.
Like culturally on a global level, definitely not. Yeah. You know, but nevertheless, there are individuals that seem to still be able to work things at least at a level that seems to be generating interesting trees and interesting art. I mean, I don't know. Do you think that art is becoming lower quality?
Yeah.
You do?
I do.
Okay.
I think that with social media, with what's happening with the movement of, oh, what's next? I'm going to scroll. I'm going to keep scrolling. What's next? You know, I think that art has got caught up into that. And it's moving so fast that it can never, you know, who sets with a painting? Who just gives themselves, you know, a day to discover new art? No one. It's everything is moving so fast. I feel like it has to be a detriment to the quality.
Yeah, interesting. See, I still feel like I can appreciate that, and I hear that. I still feel like art on the highest level, which seems to me to demand a prolific body of work with a mastery of craft and have context of something to say, right? People that are doing that on the highest level are still doing it
Mm-hmm.
on the highest level because they have whatever they have to say, they have something to say that's profound. I mean, like, I still think people have profound things to say and are using different mediums to say it. And I do wonder if there are more of them now than there used to be. Because you could really kind of wrap up generational talents from different cultures or countries on one hand or two for a lot of modern history, and now you can't wrap your arms around the number of artists doing things that are truly innovative and profound.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's almost infinite now, the number of people doing crazy things. Have the algorithms homogenized the sort of middle and lower sections of the pyramid of creative art practice? Absolutely. But that top tier is always going to rise above societal norms, technological homogenization. I think those are the people that have an impact, and I think those are the people that are not untouched but are less touched by the digital era. That's my hope. Maybe I'm projecting my hope.
I mean, I have the same. I hope, and maybe I'm being a little bit hard on the art movement right now.
Yeah.
I just, again, I don't feel like anyone is getting that recognition that they need.
Yeah,
right
the
now.
vehicle for artists to succeed has changed
Tremendously.
Yeah, it's been democratized.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been taken out of the hands of a few individuals that kind of say, or organizations or galleries or, that say this is art. And I think that's...
And who gets to stamp that? Who gets to, like...
Well, I mean, and that was always the question, right? Who gets to stamp that? Why do they have the authority? It was influential figures that somehow had been, deemed, you have better taste than everybody else, right? You know, it's like being knighted by the art snobs, like,
Sure.
Oh, tell me what is art, kind of a thing.
But I want to... And now it's likes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Totally. But like, I want to go back. I want to go back to what you were talking about with painting in terms of, because I don't think there's an end to talking about the impact of social media, but I want to go back to your painting because you were talking about going on a 7-day bender where you're painting for maybe 10 hours a day and the oil paints might make you have to wait, and that changes the outcome of what you're painting. But what happens in your life, mind, emotions, heart, soul, where you suddenly need to paint? And what happens where you stop?
Yeah, that's easy. It's dopamine for me. Like, I have to do it.
When you're depleted of dopamine, it's time for Thomas to paint.
It's time to paint.
Okay, all right.
It's that hit that I need. And then
So are you feeling bad? Are you feeling miserable? And then you go paint and you feel happy and better?
I feel like the demons in the head are starting to they're getting a little too loud at this point. And everything is, and I need that time. It's meditation for me.
Okay.
So I think everyone needs a form of meditation.
Sure.
Whether it's traditional meditation, or it's art, or it's something, a place where you can just be calm and be alone. And I think about basketball. I love playing basketball, and there's many reasons. I'm competitive, so that's one. But I love that whenever I'm playing basketball, it's me versus the opponent in front of me, and there's nothing else. My brain is blank because I'm so focused on that opponent in front of me. And I think they talk about that in the same as in boxing and certain different sports where you you get to just forget everything because your brain has to fully concentrate on what's going on right in front of you.
Right.
And that's the same for me when it comes to art. All I'm thinking about at those times is just what I'm going to put on the canvas or what I'm sculpting, that sort of thing. And so it calms everything down. And then I'll get to the point of exhaustion. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, if you feel tired at that point, I just want to go sleep, you know? So that's kind of it for me. I mean, there's always that craving to create, because I do want to bring something to life. And then there's the can I do it part,
like the challenge,
you know, which can be bad because that can steer you away from, you know, I can get to the point where I'm satisfied with what I'm painting or I'm satisfied with what I'm sculpting. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to try to, I don't know. I got an architectural model in my head. I'm going to go build this model, you know, of this house that I want to build someday, that sort of thing. And then, you know, and it's really funny because my wife will come in and she'll be like, that's really beautiful. Why are you doing that?
But do you have to have an answer to why? Like, isn't that the whole purpose of art? It's like, you don't have to
I think
answer why, or is that different? I don't know.
I don't know either. And I struggle with that. You know, why make art, right? Why there's a monetary value to art and you could be doing it for that reason. And that's a whole
different ball of wax.
Right.
I think if I were trying to make bonsai to make money, number one, I would have already failed. And number two, I wouldn't love it anymore.
Yeah.
And I would, if you need to be painting for the meditation of it, then it's like, it goes back to the question that we started with, which is your wife saying, imagine if you had to paint every day, 10 hours a day. In her equestrian practice, she's trying to communicate to you how hard that would be. And your mind goes to, yeah, but what would I be making? Right? Like what would that turn into? And I think that was the same question that I asked myself when I decided that I wasn't going to do bonsai as a hobby, that I was going to do it as a profession. Because I could have done bonsai as a hobby and made a lot more money somewhere else. And I know a lot of people that make that choice. I'm going to do bonsai more once I retire. This is what I'm doing up until that point.
Right.
And I just feel like, well, I would rather live a less financially stable life to be able to do bonsai every day. And for me personally, I wanted the pressure of having to do it every day. Otherwise, I would opt out of not doing it. Just like, yoga teachers, when they're not teaching yoga, some of them have a hard time doing yoga on their own. But the most important thing for a yoga teacher is to continue doing their own personal yoga practice outside of teaching. You know, and it's like, this is a constant theme across all fields of whatever practice. Because practice is a discipline in addition. So I just think it's really interesting, like where your mind went when your wife posed you with that. And then basically what you're saying is that painting, when the noise gets too loud, you're going to paint until either the noise is quiet or you're too exhausted to paint anymore.
Right.
And then what happens?
And then, that point, that can be another area where, because you're exhausted and you don't paint or I'm not creating something, and then can be some guilt around that, which is whole,
like, why am I not painting now?
Yeah. Like, oh, look at this time you just wasted. You just took a 2-hour nap. What are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, like
this is one thing that, like, I was telling you, I was listening to that Michael Pollan conversation, and he was talking about consciousness, and he was talking about creatives in consciousness, and he said, I forget who he was talking about, Dolly or one of these great, like, highly regarded super creatives. And he's like, yeah, they would only work like 3 or 4 hours a day. but it was like super intense.
Mhm.
And then the rest of the day they would spend long walks, time in nature, time just spent doing nothing, thinking. And he's like, I think that really bred a lot of the great creativity that they brought to the world. And his whole point was, we're like filling that time where our mind can move from boredom into, like, boredom actually catalyzes your mind starting to occupy that time and space with thought. And that's a lot of times where creativity is born, in that stillness and that lack of necessity to be stimulated. The mind starts going to work again. And I thought that was really interesting. But the practicality of making a living doing an art form is that doing it for 4 hours a day doesn't quite cut the mustard in the United States, right? In the modern era.
No, absolutely.
And for you, it sounds like creatively it's not sustainable to be binging on painting for weeks at a time, because it sounds to me like you hit a point of depletion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You
And now
get to
that
a point where you just can't do it.
Uh-huh.
It's physically you just cannot do it anymore.
So when you have that desire to go make this architectural model and your wife says, why, is that where your metal pieces are born out of?
They can be. Yeah, they can be.
Or are the metal pieces born out of the desire to paint and you don't have anything to paint? Where do you move between these mediums now?
That's a great question. It's ideas. So, I get an idea, especially for a sculpture piece, and I'm like, okay, the idea is there, and I've got to try to physically make that, right? Because that idea, I never like the ideas just to float around in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once it's there, I really want to get it out.
I'm the same way.
Because it just drives me insane. And so
you want to see it.
I want to see it. I want to make it. I want to be in that process.
Okay.
Because the process for me is everything. And
it's top, right?
Yeah.
It's not about the final product.
Yeah. You get done with it and you're like, okay,
all right. Yeah. What's next?
What's next?
Okay.
But
we see
having that idea in my head, that's the worst. I mean, it's great. Love it. Love having the ideas. Right. But if I'm not able to create them, if I'm not able to like extract them from my brain and put them into some physical form, then it's like a cancer up there or something.
Right.
It just eats away at me.
Right.
So, and sometimes you want to, I read this really great, Tom Waits talking about creativity. And he was talking about how, like, sometimes he yells at his creative voice to shut the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, stop it. I'm driving here. I don't need you to,
get inside
me.
I
don't have any way of
start wrenching around.
I don't have a guitar with me. Yeah. I can't do anything with this. So shut up.
Yeah.
No. Stop. And so those 3 a.m. You wake up and you're like, oh, that would be amazing. And then you're like, no, wait, stop. Come.
Yeah, I can't do anything with this right now. I can't grab it. Do you ever have ideas where you're like, as it's like floating away and you're like, no, come back.
Yes.
Come back. Oh,
yes.
dude, that is.
You're like, wow.
That gives me anxiety, actually.
Yes.
It gives me tremendous anxiety.
Yeah.
That moment where you have that idea, trying to capture that and grab that and hold it so it doesn't go.
Yeah.
Oof.
Half an idea is the worst.
It is tough. or just a fragment of the idea,
yes.
And you're like, you can't extract the rest of the DNA or image. It's like, that's to me torture. So that's more torture than having an idea, is having half of that idea. It's like,
the idea,
because you knew it was so good. Yeah,
it's still up there. It's still gonna do it's
absolutely.
Like,
everybody has ideas. I really came to a point when I was in my apprenticeship and I was sitting in Seiza wiring for like 12 hours a day in my like 5th and 6th year, where I would have I used to eat a tremendous amount of Yoplait yogurt.
Okay.
And Yoplait yogurt in Japan comes in these little like cardboard things that hold 2 Yoplait containers. So I would have this like perforated Yoplait cardboard thing that became my like source of notes that would be sitting next to me, because I would have like a Yoplait yogurt that I would like, and then I would like write this idea down. So I have a whole book of like Yoplait yogurt.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Notes that I've saved. But I really realized, like, man, these ideas, the most brilliant idea in the world, we like look at brilliant people and we're like, oh, they're brilliant because they have a lot of good ideas. But you don't need a lot of good ideas. You just need the good idea, and to grab it and to bring it to fruition, right? And like, everybody's capable of being a brilliant individual if they grab the idea and they're able to manifest it and bring it into reality, right? With their skill set under all of these conditions that they exist in. Like, everybody has that opportunity. Everybody has ideas.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most crazy realizations that I came to was, again, listening to somebody talk about creativity. And they said, there was a moment where human beings realized that ideas, where we came consciously to the realization that our ideas were ideas. That we did not know that they were ideas, that people thought that was the divine speaking through them, that they thought that was spiritual or some other realm working through them. And when we realized, oh, that's an idea. That moment of thought is like an idea. Can you imagine? Can you imagine one day you think that like some divine entity is speaking through you, and the next day you're realizing, oh, that's not a divine entity. That's me.
That's me.
And then the value of that thing that you just generated.
Right.
Anyways, that's my that's my talk on ideas. I don't have any more to say about it.
I mean, well, I do want to comment that it takes once you have the idea, then the discipline has to kick in.
Yeah, I feel that.
That's the other.
Do you have to be disciplined about bringing your ideas to fruition?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
So even though you have a compulsion to take this idea and bring it to reality, and it's torture to not, you still feel like it requires discipline to do so.
Yeah, because a lot of times once I have the idea, then in my brain, it's already made. Mm-hmm. And so I'm getting all the pleasure, right? I'm getting it because it's already made.
But you haven't put the labor in
yet.
I haven't
put that's where the discipline comes in. Oh, no, I've actually got to make this thing because it's, and that's why a lot of people talk about, like, hey, if you have a really good idea, don't tell anyone. Mm-hmm. Because in the act of telling, your brain is like, oh, you've already done that.
We've manifested.
And you're going to get all of that dopamine release from that. And then you're not going to have any desire to actually create it after that.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So just, be really quiet about really good ideas.
Yeah.
Until you can actually show it.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. There's something for me working in a 3-dimensional medium, which you interestingly move from 2-dimension to 3-dimension really seamlessly.
Thank you.
Between your painting and your sculpture.
Yeah.
Which, like, getting to do this together where we're going to be working with both of your 2D and 3D creativity is like really fun. Because although I've seen and enjoy your painting, mm-hmm. I've worked more with your 3-dimensional sculpture now at this point. My exposure to your work has become more 3-dimensional.
Right.
So to pair the two together is going to be really, really interesting. But I feel like seeing something come together in 3 dimensions, for me, has so much more satisfying for me than when I used to paint and it was 2-dimensional.
Yes.
Because when you get that extra field of depth, it's an exponential increase in that moment where you realize a vision. Yeah. And how does that work for you, moving between the two so seamlessly?
Well, I think that it might be a transition that's happening right now. My wife told me once. She said, you started out as a painter, you'll end as a sculptor.
She sees it happening.
Because of just what you talked about. There's something about that 3 dimension. You had to hold it, feel it.
Yeah.
It's right there. Walk around it completely.
Yeah.
Painting, you don't get to walk around it completely.
Yeah.
Although I thought about like, what if I painted in cylinders?
Well, now we're talking about something special. That's like the moment that I heard Richard Serra say, "I'm not making these giant steel sculptures for you to enjoy the sculpture. I'm making these giant steel sculptures for people to experience the space between them." And it was just like,
right. Right.
Because now you have this massive looming positive space, and the odd nuance of the space between it is like, that's what matters. And Richard Serra, I don't know if you know about his printmaking work, but he did a tremendous amount of printmaking where he explored very large swaths of like single monochromatic color with just small spaces of a lack of color or a different color between these big, just like his sculptures, but on a 2-dimensional plane, right?
Right.
And Jonathan Cross made me aware of that because he used to actually print Richard's work.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so that was like yet another one of these like moments working with Jonathan.
What a talented individual.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's been informed and influenced by some of the most cutting edge creatives of our time.
Yeah.
Which makes you realize how special his work is, because he obviously has it, but he's also witnessed other people who are doing it at the higgest level, which I think informs. You get a little bit of the rub, you get a little bit of the shine every time you work
be around that.
Yeah, you have to get to know how to take an idea and bring it to fruition is not a skill that comes without practice. And when you're mentored to do that by people that have figured out how to do it, it helps you do it better, like any other skill, I think. Yeah. That was really where obviously apprenticing with Mr. Kimura was a big deal, to manifest these concepts with a tree in bonsai. But it's also really where hanging out with Randy Knight has had a huge impact for me, because he does not see limitation. Some people see limitation. It's big. That's going to be hard. That's going to be physically demanding. That's going to be time intensive. That's going to be financially daunting. And Randy just be like, and what's the problem here? Like, the first boulder we set at Mirai looked massive when I bought it at the stone yard.
Yeah.
The moment it got set in this sea of gravel and untouched landscape here, it looked like a pebble. And I was like, oh God, I thought I needed 1 or 2 of these. He's like, yeah, you're going to need a lot more rocks.
And a lot bigger.
And a lot bigger rocks. Like this is the first of many. This is the first of many.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
You go to his garden and you see what he's
no limits.
It's amazing.
No limits. Yeah, no limits.
It just blows you away.
And that really helped me. I mean, look at what Mirai's turned into. And, Randy's been a big part of this, as have the artists that we work with. Now your work is a lot more prominent and prevalent here. We're working on a Randy Knight tree and a Thomas Nevar sculpture today. And that like, these are influential individuals in what has led this place to become what it is. I think it's really special to get to combine all of these forces.
Wow.
And
I'm overwhelmed. I mean, emotionally, it's like,
it's intense, isn't it?
It's really,
yeah. And I think it's really special for you and I to get to sit down and reflect on these things together, because you obviously think about it a lot. Beyond, you're a creative director, you're a graphic designer, you're a painter, you're a sculptor, you're an artist as the sort of overarching umbrella. Yeah. And now bonsai is becoming a medium for you as well.
Yeah.
Why bonsai?
I do not know, but there is something about it, and it has always been. The first time I saw a bonsai tree, it just fell in love. Just was like, what is this?
When did you see a bonsai tree the first time?
It was in a mall somebody was selling these little trees.
Yeah. It's all it took.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's all it took. And I'm, looking back, the tree, I'm sure was just a little juniper, nothing, special, but there was something about it. There was just something about that tree in that pot. And it would always, I would buy books on it. I would try to get little trees and kill them immediately because I had no idea what I was doing. But it wasn't until and we were talking yesterday, that group of cypress trees that you have. I was just scrolling through the internet and I saw that, and I was like, "What the hell is that?" Like,
what has this guy done?
This was like, oh, okay, all right. Yeah, and at the time, my assistant at the time, she knew of you. Oh. And I showed her because she was also really liked Bonsai, and she was like, "Oh, that's Ryan Neal. He's actually up in near Portland." I was like, "What? Somebody here is doing this that kind of work." And then it was really funny because when I actually saw the size of it, when there was like you standing next to it, and I realized how big it was.
Yeah.
Then it was just like, oh, Bonsai doesn't need to be tiny.
Yeah.
Like I had no idea.
I had that moment. First time I went to Japan and I was like, oh, I like this better. Bigger is better.
Is much, much better.
Bigger is better. Just the scale. I'm just thinking about the first time that I saw your work. You came here though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I came up
to see the garden. To see the garden.
Yeah.
And you brought the book.
Right.
And I looked at. So I'll be totally honest with you.
Yeah.
When I look at Bonsai Mirai and like what I do with my work, it's just normal. It's just normal to me. This is what I do.
Yeah.
I don't have any impression that what I do is different, unique, spectacular, bigger, better, badder, lesser than, inferior. Like I don't really think about that, right? And when people say that they're inspired by my work, it makes me feel very bashful.
Oh.
Makes me feel slightly like an imposter, the imposter syndrome thing, right? Like I'm like, gosh, do they really know? Like, do they know that I screw up sometimes? Do they know that I failed? Do they know, like all of those things, I'm thinking about that. And so when people say like, oh, we find your work really inspirational and stuff, I have like this kind of automated like, oh, thank you very much. And I really do feel flattered by it when people tell me that, but I deflect because I have a natural insecurity myself. Right. And I think a lot of people probably do. So there is a moment when somebody tells me they're inspired by my work and I do the natural deflection and like try to keep walking because I feel awkward that somebody's, been inspired by my work, and I feel like all of those feels. And then when that person shares their work with me, that's kind of the moment of truth for how it's all going to actually register when the situation has passed and I'm sitting by myself reflecting on it.
Yeah.
And when I saw your work and you had said some very kind things about my work, and then I saw the quality and the caliber and the artistry of your work, the impact of you sharing that this place was inspirational to you, like had a seismic impact on me because your work was of such a level that like those moments are trajectory changing. They give me confidence. They give me more boldness in leaning into my ideas that much further. And you've continued to be very supportive of my work since we first met and we've started working together, and your work is evolving and my work is evolving. And now all of a sudden we have this synergy where we've been working together and we're putting each other's work, to task in our own practices, and like that kind of synergy is a drug for me when I find that moment, you know, and I've had that moment with Jonathan Cross and Ron Lang and a few other individuals, but this is yet again different because you're doing things across so many mediums at such a level that's where you are very unique, and this is new for me. But that was a pretty seismic moment when I saw your work for the first time, because I was inspired by your work, but you had also said kind things to me and said you were inspired by my work, and that whole like awkwardness sort of shedding of that, like, oh, thank you, that's very nice, and then all the, you know, and then it was just like, oh, so it's had like a pretty profound impact.
Yeah. That means a lot to me, because obviously your work has, it is so impactful. And, you know, I find myself just looking through your website, just going through, looking at the trees.
Cool. Yeah.
It's just like, just
I appreciate
through.
that. I like our website too.
Yeah.
I'm proud of it.
To like look at those trees and what you've been able to create. And it's just like, that's so, you know.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I also get a little, you and I were talking about like when you podcast, you take on a different personality or something like that.
A little bit. Yeah. The personality changes.
Yeah. I think if we're both being honest, like there's a slight little click. There's a mode there, you know? Whenever I like step back from having podcasted or talked or conversed with an artist that I really respect, I feel it's like a little cringy because I kind of like wax poetically and swoon about their work and stuff. And I think some of that feeling of insecurity for me is like, am I seeing their art correctly? You know, am I responding to it correctly? And like, what is that correctly? Like doing justice to it, interpreting the merit of it accurately, you know, like I'm really self-critical about my eye and my impression of taste and timeless beauty.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to create that. It's such a filter for me for like what I'm trying to do, that I try to be very scrutinizing about the art that I digest and that I respect as well. Because you can very easily slip off of the edge and lose that sense of taste. I think.
I think you're absolutely correct.
I work at it. I work at trying to elevate my level of taste and like what informs and inspires. And so, you know, all of that, as we've been working together more and more, there's been it's been a delicate dance for me working with you. Yeah. More so than anybody else, because of the untapped potential and uncharted territory of what we're trying to do, and the fear of doing justice to, as well, all of that stuff, right? So I just want to like put it all out there, not to sound like I'm like falling in love or anything like that, but just like from one artist to another, it's like, okay, this is very serious for me. I take this very serious. And also inside of that, I want to like do justice to it by just being myself, you know, and you being yourself, and we're making something, and not to take it too serious, even though I'm taking it very serious. I think that's like the complexity of all of this.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and you're on this very high echelon, right? You know, and I'm a bit of an underground artist. I've always kind of, you know, you've
a high echelon of a niche inside of a niche inside of a niche endeavor, which means,
well, yeah, you
honestly,
say that.
I'm an underground artist.
Well, you say that, but your work has been in the Portland Museum of Art.
It's true. Yep.
Yeah. So you've arrived in that sense. And
as much as you can arrive with an art, with a medium that's constantly changing, right?
Right.
Which is what's so funny.
So I appreciate so much your, you recognizing in me that there was something
Undeniable.
there. That's, that was
Everybody recognizes it though, Thomas. It's just the fact that
Yeah,
you haven't unveiled it to everybody yet, right?
And that's part of it, is that I haven't unveiled it, and you gave me the confidence to unveil it.
Cool. Good.
Which that means so much.
Yeah. That makes me feel good. I feel good that is the impact.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I have to ask you now.
Okay.
When do you know that you're done? When is a painting done for Thomas Nevar?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that question.
Did you know?
Yeah, because I asked you.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, he's gonna ask me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what am I gonna say?
It's only fair.
It's only fair.
Yeah.
I hate to say that I don't know. There's a feeling. There's it just, and when I say I don't know, I'm meaning that I can't put it into words, but it'll just arrive. It's like it's on its way. Oh, it's here for me. So I'm looking at it. I'm putting the paint on the canvas or the stain or whatever I'm doing, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, there it is, and it's like a tingle in the back of my neck, just like this, this feeling. It's like, oh,
gave it to you.
Yeah. It's like there. That's nice. That works, and that can be interrupted in that sometimes. And we were talking about this a little yesterday. My wife can come home and see something, and she can just be like, "That's good, but what if?" And she'll move it or say like this is, and then it can that can sort of reset it a little bit. For me. It can be like,
sends you off on it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I appreciate because I'm only one person, and I only have, and yes, I created it, but then I had the vision for it, but that doesn't necessarily make it right or finished, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's finished doesn't make it finished. Like someone else can see something more in it that needs to happen. And I'm open to those suggestions.
Sure.
With certain people.
Sure.
We talked about that.
This is our conversation last night of do I take feedback about my trees?
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I think it seems like you related and we related to the fact that like open to feedback, but then there's a moment where we know.
Yeah.
At least I'll speak for myself. There's a moment where I know, okay, now I've got the scent. Now I'm on the trail. I'm thinking about like a dog finding a scent, and it's like you just know when you're on the right
I watched
path
that last night.
now. Yeah.
I watched you work on that tree. I saw you pick up. You were a hound dog that just
I was searching. I was searching.
Oh, there it is. There's the scent. Because I had no idea you were working on this tree and that had already been wired out, but needed a little bit of refinement. And I thought it was lovely. And I was like, what is he going to do? How's he going to make this better? And then it was so fun to watch you start to move these limbs. And it's like, oh. And then you're like, yep, there it is. And I'm like, Jesus, how did he do that?
Yeah.
How was he able to?
I love that. I love that process of sitting down and, for me, the way that it makes sense is I'm trying to find something, and what I'm trying to find is what we started out talking about. I'm trying to find that tree's uniqueness, that tree's character.
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to find what that tree, it's like, I know you're in there. What do you have to give me? What do you have to show us? And it's like, and how do I extract that to the maximum potential? And obviously I have and this is where we were talking about looking at another bonsai artist's work and saying, I appreciate what they did on this tree, and I would love to have that exact same tree that I could then go to their work and apply my concepts And to see the two side by side, I would learn so much from that experience of what they created, what I took that tree's character to be and created, and to see them compared would just be the ultimate experience for me. And it's never going to be possible to have what they created remain three-dimensionally next to what I've created and altered and changed three-dimensionally, so that you could see them both and experience them both three-dimensionally. But damn it, I want that experience, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe you could both swap a tree, like get it to where you want, and then swap, and then see what, because at least you would have video or photos of where you landed with the tree, and
totally
swap it over and see what they do as far as how they would manipulate it even further.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
but
maybe
again,
there's a way.
I don't know if that's I imagine, especially with the larger structure limbs, you're not going to be able to really put those.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
that's the problem. Is I think ultimately, if I had to put some sort of caveat on what I do, I probably change structure more than most bonsai practitioners. I probably start at the heavy base structure more. And that was what was so interesting about looking. It's always what's interesting about looking at other bonsai artists that I respect. And, there's a number of them that I look at and I'm constantly like, they handle structure differently. And here's what the outcome of handling structure differently looks like. And here's where my eye gets caught and where I would focus and where I would, see the ability to do something different. But it's going to change this whole thing that under their interpretation of bonsai has created a beautiful, when I see somebody who's really good, the whole image is beautiful, like that there's a comprehensive continuity to it. And that's, I think, one of the defining characteristics of a really talented artist in general is the composition as a whole is a composition that works together.
Yeah, right.
There's interesting parts to a lot of trees that don't work as a total composition.
Yeah.
There's less value in that for me. So it's like, I love that. I love that knowledge that totality is the takeaway for me. This whole thing that we're doing right now started with, I believe you brought up some paintings, some large scale paintings. And we put them in the studio around a tree. And we shot this incremental exposure where we raised the light.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we turned the light back down.
Right.
I have that somewhere. Yeah. And I still haven't seen it. I'm going to find that. It's somewhere in the land of Mirai's plethora of video content.
Right.
Anyways. And that kind of created this notion of an exhibition that we would do together. But then it went farther and you said, sometime I would love to just come up and paint while you're working on a tree. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool. And I'm thinking in the workshop, nobody's around.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be making a tree, you'll be painting, we'll be bullshitting. Who knows?
That's exactly what I had in my head too.
Right. And maybe that's like what this is going to be. It's like I have no expectation of what's going to be. But when I've talked about this project with people and told them that we're doing this, they're like, well, are you going to be watching him paint? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, well, is he going to be looking at what you're doing? And I said, I don't know. And they asked, well, are you guys going to like be inspiring each other? Or are you just making stuff while you're in the same room? And I said, I don't know.
I think that's a great question.
So you don't know either?
I don't know either.
Yeah, right.
Because I've been thinking about it as well.
Yeah.
I'm really thinking about like, how will my work be influenced?
Well, have you ever made work while somebody else is making work?
Mm-mm.
I haven't either.
No.
I've never done that.
First for me.
Yeah, I've never done that where I'm making something creative while somebody else is making something creative.
And in fact, for me, and I know you teach a lot, so you're probably pretty used to creating the work in front of an audience. But for me, like this is painting is such a solitary
Oh, that's
activity for me.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is really new for me, and I'm curious of
Oh, are you nervous?
I don't think it's nervous. I'm anxious in that what it's going to be. Like I'm my anticipation. Like, okay, what is this actually going to look like, and what's it?
I had I don't know if this relates, but I had the first time we did a project in the wild. I really was like, what is this? What is happening? Like, what am I doing?
Right.
What is this going to be? And it was just the biggest anxiety of anticipation.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I'm sorry if that's what you're going through. I honestly don't know what this is going to be, but I'm just thinking it's going to be really fun.
Well, I think that there's there's also that you get done with, and it can happen. I can get finished with a painting and go, it's not my favorite.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, and there is a little anxiety around that. Like, what if it's just
it's the beauty of video,
right?
If you're like, please don't show this.
No,
that's
I don't
pretty
think
easy.
That's going to be the case. I really don't. But I have to admit that I've been practicing a technique to try to, because there's only a limited amount of time here, and trying to a technique that's a little faster. So this is really kind of new for me.
Great. Well, this is new for all of us then.
Yeah.
It's good that it's new, and that we're not like, yeah, I've done this all the time, and you're like, I've never done this, and then that would suck. That'd be like, well, let's not do that.
Yeah. So everything. So working in front of a camera or working in front of another individual, all of this, and even the technique, even this new style of painting for me is all just brand new.
That's fantastic.
And it's like, wow.
I've never styled a tree in one of your vessels. This is all new for me too.
There we go. There we go.
If that's a new technique for you, this is a new technique for me. I have no idea what your vessel's gonna inspire me. Yes. You're gonna be painting there as well. I'm imagining that there's gonna be a lot going on inside the old dome.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see how stylistic, like what comes of that tree, because it's such a magnificent tree and in that vessel, and
it's a magnificent tree in the vessel, and it is completely unreconciled. That's the beautiful part about it. It has been waiting to find its way. It's been waiting for the moment and the context to find its way.
Yeah.
And when we put it into the vessel, I've just been waiting for a calendar year for this moment.
Right.
Because it's like, well, now the tree has its home. It didn't fit in a bonsai container. It was not appropriate. It was not inspiring. Nobody ever looked at that tree. It's so weird. It's such an odd tree for nobody to ever look at. And now that it's in your container, everybody looks at it.
Right.
Everybody looks at it, but it's unreconciled. Yeah. And I don't know what it's going to become.
Well, it was I love that moment, because we were walking around the garden talking about this container and talking about a tree that would go in it. And then it was almost like when you turned a corner and the sunlight was just beaming down on this tree. It was like
the heavenly light. Ooh, and we were like, that one.
That's it.
Let's go. And then we repotted it, and off we went.
Off we went.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we need to feel... I think about in these like unique circumstances, as much as we can just be present and not feel pressured. Like, my greatest hope for you is to just paint. My greatest hope for me is to just make.
There we go.
And then see what happens with it. I don't know. I might not look at anything that you're doing. I might look at everything that you're doing. I might be more interested in what you're doing than what I'm doing. I don't know. I have no idea.
Right.
I think it's all okay. Yeah.
I think it's going to be amazing. I'm so very excited.
Cool.
So
cool. All right. Yeah. We'll see what the product of collaboration on this level is. I don't know that I've ever seen a bonsai made in this way.
What it reminds me of is like when you would like in college, and you'd study your ass off for an exam, and you were just so, anticipating that exam, just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It's because you studied so hard for it, and you wanted. That's the same feeling right now.
Yeah.
And it always worked out. It was always like that was, those were always the tests that you did the best on. Obviously, you got to study for them and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that. It's like I'm ready. I feel ready. All right, I got another question for you.
Okay.
This is completely a new subject.
Okay.
I'll talk about Japan a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about Japan.
The readers want to know, right?
Yeah, the readers want to know.
What's your And again, I don't know. Like I know a little bit about your background and of working in Japan.
Yeah.
And I know that there's something there that's there's some, I don't want to say animosity, but something.
Yeah, something.
And I've always been curious.
Yeah. I thought about this a lot last night.
Yeah. Well, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, and it was like we came to this conclusion. Oh, maybe,
Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's actually important for me, like on a personal level, to work through whatever that is.
Yeah.
And it's been a long, like, slow burn. I never would be who I am and be where I'm at without my experience apprenticing myself to Mr. Kimura.
Yeah.
He was the best in the world. He's the best the world's ever seen. Several generational talent that revolutionized bonsai.
Yeah.
To me, he was somebody who approached bonsai as an artist, and he really brought bonsai from a craft to an art. I think he brought about the entire modernization and revolution in bonsai on so many levels, whether it's carving, treating a tree as sculpture, tapping into greater age through asymmetrical representation, using stone in bigger, badder ways, flipping trees upside down horticulturally, scientifically, like mechanically, his engineering mind, like all of those things. And I apprenticed myself to Mr. Kimura, and I asked him to teach me, and he did. And I totally accepted the terms of that, and I've talked about it after my apprenticeship. And I think talking about it and working through it, there was no way for me to understand that without talking about it. And there was no way to talk about it without some of those things being public. But I've never said anything about Mr. Kimura that feels like I'm slandering him, and I think Japanese culture is a very closed culture as far as I understand it. I have my experience of living in it for 6 years, and I would say a very traditional role as an apprentice to a master of a traditional art form. I understand that there are rules and boundaries and cultural ideals, value systems that are different between American culture and Japanese culture. And when the New Yorker article happened, I think that the Japanese bonsai community felt like I crossed those lines, and I did something that was culturally unacceptable. I think that they felt like I was profiting off of Mr. Kimura's name attention-wise, and I think that they felt like I did something disrespectful and sold out my master and slandered him. My feeling with that whole situation is I trusted an individual, a journalist. He asked me complicated questions about my apprenticeship, and I said, I will talk about these because they are objective truths. This is not me slandering my master. This is just the nature of a very complex artist and individual who has revolutionized the art form. But we can't, this is not the focus, because I agreed to this. These were the terms of my apprenticeship. I knew it was going to be difficult. I had talked with other people who had apprenticed with him. I knew I didn't know what I was getting into, but I knew it was going to be challenging, and I knew I was there studying with the greatest bonsai master that's lived.
Yeah.
And every day I accepted that, and it doesn't mean that it was easy, and it doesn't mean that it felt fair, but but I agreed to it. So it was not against my will, right? It was not abusive. It was not anything like that. It was something that I asked for and he gave me, right? And that was like a backbone of this article. Is I'll talk about some of the complexities, and I didn't talk about, if people think that I sold Mr. Kimura out, it's really unfortunate, because there's a lot of things that I would never talk about, ever. They're not mine to say. They're not things that people need to know. Talking about the rigors of an apprenticeship does not feel to me like I'm bad-mouthing anybody. That's the reality of it. That is what an apprenticeship looked like. Under his tutelage, that is what an apprenticeship looked like. And I didn't ever say that it was bad or I had a problem with it, you know? So that's where it got really complex, because I agreed to talk about some of the nuances of it as long as it was very clearly acknowledged that I appreciated it, I was there willingly, and it's made me who I am. And those things got lost in the editing process and the writing process to the current cultural state in the United States. When that article came out, there were all kinds of things about abuse of power and whatnot societally that were taking a front stage. And if you're looking for clicks and reads, that's what the trend of that article was. And it just could not have been more damaging or devastating. And I could not have felt more betrayed. When it came out and the fact checking happened, I could not have felt more betrayed. Exactly what I asked to not happen is exactly what happened, and it was worse than I could have imagined. And it caused a major rift that basically severed my relationships in Japan and my ties. And I've been thinking ever since, how do I mend that situation?
Yeah.
And I'm still thinking about it. But that is that situation. And I think the bigger thing that you're asking me is why I have such an internal conflict from my apprenticeship, why it had such an impact on me. And that's probably the bigger thing that I think about, because I do not, I'm grateful. Let's just be really clear. I'm grateful that for what Mr. Kimura gave me. He took a risk. I feel like I've done my very best to do justice to the effort, the teaching that he gave me, what he put in to building me as an apprentice and a bonsai practitioner. I've tried to represent him very well by doing it at the highest level. I've sacrificed a lot of myself to try and represent him well. However much he feels I represent him, however much I feel like I need to represent him. He's his own person. I'm my own person. I do carry his name. I've tried to do justice to it. I didn't want to undercut all of that with the New Yorker article, and I'm sad that that happened. But on a personal level, I did walk away from Japan with a lot of anger. And I walked away from Japan, I think, with a lot of resentment, which is not appropriate necessarily, because I agreed to it, and that was a culture that I said, please teach me, and he did, right? I didn't get to pick the way I'm taught. And I can leave at any time if it didn't work for me. And I stayed. So I have to own that. What I've kind of come to is I think everybody has a different mental and emotional susceptibility to different triggers and mechanisms. And I think where I felt resentment was that you can maximize the potential of an individual if you can pinpoint their weaknesses and you can push on that red button. Right?
Unfortunately.
You can drive them to do things that they wouldn't do. And here's the thing, those things might exceed what they could have accomplished if you didn't push that button constantly. But that button doesn't get pushed for free. There is a plaque or a detritus that accumulates when you push that button over and over again. And I think that there is a cultural priority put on greatness without the consideration of human impact in Japan. And I think you see it culturally have a very, very large cultural impact on their society. And it has created some of the greatest traditional art. It has created some of the most refined human achievements. It has created some of the most beautiful history and cultural context that the world emulates, idolizes, and aspires to match,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And there is also a shadow side to that creates a lot of darkness.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to deal with that. And I haven't known how to deal with that. And it's something that I've psychologically been processing ever since, through my apprenticeship, trying to process it, not in a position, being in a subservient position where the red button was being pushed a lot on my weaknesses that were driving me to be better than I ever could have achieved, because I never would have sat and pushed those buttons myself.
Mm-hmm.
And also the detritus and the plaque that accumulated from that, the shadow side of that, hasn't been really super easy for me to deal with my constitution, my psychology, my, emotional machinery. Like, it was not, I was not able to deal with it well. And here's the other thing that I realized. I could have not confronted it, not talked about it, not dealt with it. And what would that have done? My feeling in the first 2 years coming back, having apprentices, being institutionalized in that way to the apprenticeship model, not having another way, not having confronted the shadow side of that, I would have perpetuated that.
Right.
I would have perpetuated that.
Right.
That is, I think, what happens when you don't deal with that and look at, hey, that impacted me negatively. Do I want to have that impact on somebody else by conducting myself in that same way? And you get to the insecurities of, can I drive greatness? Can we achieve the same result without that?
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't know the answer to that, which is why I can't criticize it, But I just realized that that wasn't who I was. That wasn't what I wanted to perpetuate. I wanted to confront it and look it in the face. And in order for me to do that, I have talked about it, and it has become more public. And, I'm sorry if that's caused anybody any problems. And I don't know in the end whether it's right or wrong, or whether I'm good or bad, or anything like that. I just know I respect Mr. Kimura. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm sorry if I caused any hurt. And also, this is an honest byproduct of being in that situation and that experience and what came from it. And I don't have anything else that I can really say about it. Like, that is what happened.
Do you think he's proud of the work that you've done? I mean, he'd have to be, right?
You want me to be totally honest?
Of course.
This is going to sound so disrespectful, but I just want to be super transparent and honest. I don't care.
Huh.
And I'm not, and that's not defiantly I don't give a shit. That's not that. He created, in his tutelage, he created an independence. He created a strength of heart and soul through his tutelage for any of his apprentices who have lasted, who got through that. They are very rugged individuals, mentally and emotionally. Not because it was abusive or anything like that, because that is what it took to study with greatness.
Yeah.
And to endure and to take what he had to offer us. That is what it took. And the people that lasted had what it took to be able to do that, right? And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. Part of that is learning to be confident and really stand tall in your convictions and your approach and what you're making. And a big part of that is not caring what other people think about it. And that, to honestly, may be the most significant gift he gave me. And so in saying that, it's not to say I'm being disrespectful to my master or anything like that. It is to say he empowered me to not be asking that question or caring. And it took me a couple years to get there, but once I got there, that was the beginning of Mirai. That was the beginning of Ryan Neal. That was, and that came immediately after a very painful experience where I went back to Japan and I was treated as a foreigner again after everything I had gone through. to become accepted, to try and uphold the lineage of his garden, to try and uphold the quality and represent him well. And I went back to Japan and I was out. I was out of the family. And it was devastating, but it severed that umbilical cord. And I came back and it was like I got shot into outer space in a rocket. I mean, I went and saw the bristlecones, the sequoias, the redwoods. I came back. I created my first natural representation, and I was off. I was off. He did me a huge favor, whether it was intentional or not, by severing that umbilical cord and not being bound by that tether. Did I push boundaries of acceptable apprentice conduct and discussing things and what, like all of that stuff? I don't know. Maybe not. Wasn't my intention. Maybe my intentions misplaced, ignorant, whatever, all of that stuff. He tasked me with going back to the United States, elevating the level of bonsai, and doing something beyond what anybody had done before. I've done that. I've lived up to what he told me to do. Whether he likes it or not, I can't do what he told me to do and ask that question. That's where I'm at.
Do you think that moment of I don't care, did it come right after you came back from Japan that second time?
No.
No.
Was I was so hurt. That might have been where the greatest amount of anger and resentment came from. That might have been the biggest moment that really challenged me to work through all of it, because I might not have worked through all of it. I might not have addressed it. I might have perpetuated things. I just decided, oh wow. And with that, we're done, folks. Like, that's what that means. And with that, you are out.
Yeah.
And I don't even think he meant it. I don't even think it was that big of a deal. It's how I internalized it.
Yeah, that's how you interpreted it, the whole situation.
And it just shot me in this direction that I would not be who I am had that not happened, however intentional or unintentional it was. And it really did help me understand how just like one shift of perspective, one action, one look, one statement can change the entire trajectory of somebody's life. Yeah. And it did, and it's caused a lot of conflict, but it's also been at the root of like doing the things that, if you ask me, would he be proud of my work? I think he would only be proud of my work had this happened and had I gone in this direction, because I think it's the only way I would have actualized what he tasked me with.
Was part of that momentum when you came back, was part of that I'll prove you wrong? I know I deal with this quite a bit.
In the beginning, I felt yeah, I used that fire of like, because I got told a lot in Japan, a gaijin will never understand bonsai, a gaijin will never be able to make good bonsai, and I didn't really like, it had like short-term impact on me when I would experience that, but it wasn't like, I don't consider like that, however, whatever you want to consider that racism, or that's racism, like, or any sort of cultural superiority kind of a complex or whatever goes on there, like that exists across all cultures everywhere in the world, period. Sure. Right. Sure. And so like that really had like a momentary burn. It was like like a quick hit of hairspray on like an open flame, right? It is there and it was gone. Yeah. The deeper burn, the deeper cauldron that like, fueled the volcano at Mirai was the hurt I felt from rejection. Yeah. After having tried so hard under this impression that a foreigner can't do this, can't be this, I had tried so hard for his approval, for his acceptance, for his acknowledgement, and for it to be so not fickle, but for it to be so easily dismissed after all of that, was just like so gnarly, super gnarly. And I was just like, how could this be? And to this day, that aspect of his character, which makes him a great artist and an independent thinker in a culture that rewards falling in line in group think, and he was an outlier. He had to have that call. He had to have that ability. He was the only person that could do what he did to break all of those conventions and traditions, is also the thing that is most challenging about it, you know. And that, I think, is often times the aspect of greatness that like everybody wrestles with, you know. Steve Jobs wasn't a nice guy. He changed the world. Like Masahiko Kimura is a complex individual. He changed the world. Changed the world of bonsai. Masahiko Kimura brought bonsai to the modern masses.
Yeah.
I mean,
we wouldn't be sitting here talking, probably.
A lot of people would not be sitting and talking about bonsai or having any context of bonsai without him. Like on a global level, what he did will never be quantifiable.
Right.
So I'm grateful. I'm grateful. And also, it didn't come without a cost, is what it is. I'm sure he had tremendous costs from his apprenticeship, and every apprentice has a tremendous cost for the debt that they pay, the process of learning from somebody that they admire and subjecting themselves to that hierarchical situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thanks for talking about it.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been thinking about it a lot for, 16 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Should we go make some trees?
Let's go make trees.